Good morning. Welcome to Live with Liz. Another hump day. Here we are. Happy Wednesday. Today we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, this is an important conversation that we'll talk about from time to time. The last time we spoke about DEI, we were talking about how important it is for law firms. We were talking about the different measures, how to learn about it, what's important, what's not, why business is depending on this. And today, we're starting from the point that everyone's accepted that this is important and everyone has accepted that this is necessary and your firm needs a plan. So today we're going to get into the specifics of what that plan looks like. And if you know me, you know that there's some pre-planning and research involved. And this is true for your DEI plan as well. And for the pre-planning and for the research involved for this plan, for this diversity, equity, and inclusion action plan that you're going to implement at your firm, you want to start with a baseline by surveying your firm and understanding what the firm's perspective is on their inclusion, their opportunities, the different aspects of diversity at the firm. You can get ideas from your team about how to improve, about what might be missing. You can also hit the high notes with the survey. I strongly suggest that the survey be anonymous and so that you can get as much participation as possible. So once you have this baseline in place and you understand what your team is after, what is important to them and what isn't, you can also take that information along with the other information that you've gathered of all this research, the conversations we've been having on diversity, and start your plan. So every good plan starts with goals. Morning, Leah. How's it going? Glad you're here. So the goals that we're talking about, I'm going to make this super easy for you and actually just give you some. So since we know that most firms fall behind in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can start there and say your number one goal might be to attract and hire more diverse candidates, more multicultural candidates. And you can be specific with this goal. You can maybe meet the Intel rule or say, put a percentage on it. Maybe you need to beat the national averages. If you're not in the United States, check your national averages. If they're not available, maybe use the US as a guideline because you kind of understand where things stand here. And you can kind of set that in terms of equity partnership at your firm. You want to hit 20% women, you want to hit 15% people of color, and other areas of diversity that you can include, more inclusive nature in the terms of the people who make up your team. So your number one goal, hire and attract more diverse candidates. And let's, for year one, keep these goals maybe pretty simple. Your second goal might be to improve the satisfaction and engagement at the firm in general. And this is speaking toward DEI, but it's really important across the board. So this can be a part of your diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And maybe you can be more specific here too with, say, a retention goal. You want people to stay at the firm for longer, so you want to incentivize them. You want people happy, so you want to create actions that support that. And you can get into additional goals, but maybe let's just focus on these two for year one and then maybe keep them in the mix and measure them as we go forward. So once you have your goals in place, and you start to get pen to paper and write down how you're going to reach them, you need your actions. So what are you going to do to reach these goals this year? So in our last session, I gave you a very easy action, and that starts with just creating a commitment to diversity. That's simple. It's just creating a statement. So action number one, publicly state your commitment to diversity. This goes toward your goal. So you want to check your actions to make sure that they're in line with the goals that you set. That's pretty important. But this commitment statement, it is, I'm going to make this super easy for you. I'm just going to give you an idea of what this sounds like. Our firm is committed to improving diversity, equity, and inclusion across all sectors of our firm, all practice areas. We celebrate the differences in our team, and it is reflected in our service. And you can just take something like that, maybe modify it or use it verbatim, throw it on your website, but be committed to it. Don't just make the claim and do nothing. That's just the first action in a plan that works toward your goals. So once you've got that commitment made and you're really dedicated to it, there are some other actions that are pretty easy for you to go ahead and implement in year one. Other actions are going to include, or could include, setting up a diversity committee at your firm. That diversity committee can drive the other actions and make your firm accountable to those goals. So you want to make sure that the diversity committee is not just a token idea for people of color to feel like they have a voice and you just stick them in a box and say, okay, you're on the diversity committee because you're a person of color. That is not what this is. This is supposed to include leadership. It should include other levels of people at your firm to get different perspectives. Of course, diverse candidates should be involved in this, but also candidates who maybe lack diversity and need it should also be involved, especially if they're at the leadership level. So your second action then is setting up a committee to tackle the challenges of improving diversity, equity, and inclusion at your firm. So you've got your commitment and you've got your committee. This is creating a structure of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This structure is super important because later on you're going to want to commercialize the value of this DEI at your firm, but you have to establish it first before you can do that. So these types of actions are going to help reach that establishment. So you've got your commitment, you've got your committee in place. What are we going to do? What are the next steps? What are the actions that they can take as part of this plan? So some of the actions that they might take are training and maybe implement a training requirement. Another action for your first year that is super important is reviewing and updating all of your internal policies related to DEI so that you're able to foster an environment that sets the mood for these goals that you have. This is going to include maybe even your social media policies. This is going to include your human resources policies for sure. Take a close look at your career paths and your promotions and how people come to the firm, how people can reach partnership, for example, and even for other professionals where professional development is super important. These types of policies all need to have a fresh update with your newly found education in DEI to create that culture of diversity that we've talked about before, and to really help you attract those diverse candidates, to really help with improving the satisfaction at the firm from the DEI perspective. So now you've got 3 steps for your first year, or 4 steps for your first year that you can really take and run home with. So there are plenty of other actions that you can take. With regard to training, you could have a requirement in place that mirrors what your bar association does. If your bar association doesn't have a requirement in place, you can implement one for your firm on your own. Another great idea for your first year is to take a look at whether or not you've had a mentorship program or a trainee program or internship program, but mentorship is the one that I want to hone in on. If you have a mentorship program and it's just been in place as sort of maybe a long-standing program that offers opportunities to people at different levels in the firm, it's time to take a fresh look at that. And this is one of the actions that you can take as part of your plan for year one and say, okay, we either review our mentorship plan that previously didn't have a focus on DEI and update it so that it does. Or if we didn't have a mentorship plan in place or program in place at the firm, establishing one, especially as it affects DEI and goes toward that engagement and happiness level at your firm, that mentorship program can really go a long way if it's inclusive, if it's purposeful, and that's the kind of activity that's going to really help with that second goal of engagement and getting people involved. And we've talked about mentorship before, but actually having it as a plan item is really important. I want to give a shout out to an organization called Earth Justice. And you can check them out at their website is earthjustice.org. And when I was doing some research on DEI and looking at how plans work in different areas, I came across this organization. They're environmental lawyers, nonprofit, and they have an amazing DEI initiative there. They're super transparent, which is important. We talk about transparency a lot in DEI. It's one of those things that speaks to inclusion at a firm. If you're not transparent and people just kind of guess about how these things work at your firm, then you're defeating yourself and you're not going to be able to attract those candidates. You're not going to be able to create that environment of cultural sensitivity and inclusion that you're looking for, which will prohibit you from reaching that second goal with engagement and with satisfaction of your team. So then once you have these actions in place to meet your goal for the first year, if you've been specific about those percentages, you can go back at the end of the year, and truly throughout the year, you should be evaluating these things too, but measure. So how successful have you been at attracting diverse candidates? How successful have you been at retaining diverse candidates, and run another survey? So at the end of the year or beginning of the next year, you want to run a new survey and just check, see how things are going, see what people say. That will set you up to revise the plan for the next year. And the next year, you may want to keep those goals that you had initially, or you want to add some new goals, and your new goals might be more sophisticated, more robust, and more specific when it comes to participation in mentorship programs, leadership and training. And then once you have the foundation of this at your firm, once you have that diverse structure in place and your team is already starting to look more like society and reflect what the order of the day is and what people are demanding, which is this diverse and multicultural environment, then you can start to utilize that to promote your business and your commerce. Some of this will happen organically. You won't even have to promote it because you just are diverse. That is the best way. That's the best way you know that things are working out for your firm with DEI. But maybe you do want to use it for commercialization and for business. Well, you've got to have that foundation in place first before you can do that and do it successfully. But having that foundation will open you up to new pools of partners and clients and communities that you didn't have those doors open to you before because you lacked diversity. And this is something that the markets are so hungry for right now. So essential for you to do this. This planning is going to really help boost your firm, the morale of your staff, your leadership and your business will all benefit from having a plan like this in place and for actually creating an environment that improves diversity. And you do it at your firm, and this kind of has a spiraling effect. So your clients will feel it, your colleagues will feel it, it will be seen in the market and industry if you're transparent about it, and hopefully that will lead to new business for you. Now, there are a lot of resources out there that we've talked about before. If you're still looking for resources in terms of how to set up your plan, you can always contact us at Firm Forward. We will help you set up your plan, identify specific goals for your firm, help you with the baseline, conducting your survey, and taking you through these steps so that you're not alone in this process and that you have some backup to make sure that you can stay on track. We can help you with measuring, we can help you with data and analytics, we can help you with accountability. Other than that, you're on your own. No, there are tons of resources out there that you can turn to. Basically, every organization now that's professional, the bar associations have diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in intellectual property, which many of you know is our background. We've got the resources from AIPLA, from INTA, from ACIPI in Latin America as a focus, and a committee dedicated to DEI. So all of these organizations have resources available for you. You're not alone in this. And there are a lot of people who you can reach out to at diverse firms who are willing to share their stories and how they've implemented DEI plans. There are some firms that just jump to mind. AFRA in Panama has a really incredible new DEI plan. So if you are not familiar with them, maybe look them up and see what they're doing, because we can learn from the success of the firms around us who are already in this, already winning it, learning from these plans, and more importantly, from the overall diverse environment that they've created. And I wish you good luck in this endeavor, but know that we're here for you. Solutions@firmforward.com if you need additional help. And we look forward to seeing you next week at Live with Liz. Take care, everybody.